Imagine being born into a world where power, fear, and violence are just part of everyday life. For some, it's a legacy that's impossible to outrun, a name that sticks with them no matter how far they go. From mafia families in Sicily to cartel kings in Mexico, these individuals were born under the shadow of their infamous fathers. But not all of them chose to follow in those dangerous footsteps. Some tried to break free, while others stayed loyal to the world they were born into. This is the story of the sons of once powerful mafia bosses, living in the shadows of their families' legacies today. John Angelo, John Jr., Gotti. The name John Gotti still rings out in the world of organized crime like a thunderclap. Decades after his prison sentence, and even after his death, he's still the face of the mob, and no one knows that legacy better than his son, John Gotti Jr. Born on Valentine's Day, 1964 in Queens, New York, Gotti Jr. didn't get to spend much time with his dad growing up. Why? Well, when Jr. was just 5, his father was already doing a 3-year bid in Pennsylvania for hijacking cargo. You know, standard mob dad stuff. But even with all the prison time and street violence, Gotti Jr. idolized his father. He knew the streets came first for Senior, and he accepted it. As he once put it, there was nothing he didn't like about that life. The code, the action, the streets were his first love. We came second. And by action, let's be clear, we're not talking about movie-style shootouts. We're talking about real-life violence. Take the tragic story of John Favara, for example. Favara was just a regular guy, a warehouse manager from Queens. In 1980, he accidentally hit and terminated 12-year-old Frank Gotti, Jr.'s younger brother, while the boy was riding his minibike. It was ruled an accident, but in the Gotti household, that didn't matter. Gotti Sr. didn't cry in public, but behind closed doors, his son remembers hearing him sobbing. Victoria Gotti, Frank's mother, was shattered. At one point, she reportedly attacked Favara with a baseball bat when he came to apologize, and then, just a few months later, Favara vanished. Witnesses said a group of men beat him near his workplace, shoved him into a van, and he was never seen again. Rumors later claimed he was dissolved in acid. Yep, acid. Years later, Gotti Jr. admitted what many already suspected. His father ordered the hit, and just like that, any illusions Jr. had about his dad's world disappeared. But by then, he was all grown up and ready to step into the family business. In 1985, after pulling off a bold plan to kill boss Paul Castellano, John Gotti took the reins of the Gambino crime family. With dad in charge, Jr. rose fast. By 1988, he was officially in, and by his mid-20s, he was the youngest capo in Gambino history, already deep in the world of gambling and loan sharking. He called his induction the proudest moment of his life because he felt like he was finally just like his father. But it wouldn't last. In 1992, John Gotti Sr. was finally brought down, convicted of racketeering and murder thanks to mobster-turned-snitch Sammy the Bull Gravano. Gotti got life in prison, and Jr. stepped up to keep things going through the 90s, but the feds were coming for him too. In 1998, Gotti Jr. was hit with a laundry list of charges: loan sharking, bookmaking, extortion, you name it. Facing serious time, he took a plea deal and served nearly 7 years behind bars. Before heading off to prison, he had one last heart-to-heart with his father. Gotti Sr. tried to convince him to keep fighting, stay loyal, stay in the life. But when Jr. told him he was done, his dad finally said, "You're your own man, but don't think the government will stop. They'll never let you go." And boy, was he right. Even after serving his time, the government kept coming. Between 2002 and 2009, Gotti Jr. faced multiple indictments, including a wild one about a plot to dispatch of radio host Curtis Sliwa for bad-mouthing his dad. But none of the charges stuck. After 4 mistrials, the feds gave up. Jr. walked free. Now, Gotti Jr. says he's out of the game for good. All he wants is to be a husband to his wife Kimberly and a dad to his 6 kids, from mob prince to family man. Now that's a plot twist. Next we have Giovanni Reena. On February 21, 1976, Giovanni Reena, the second son of Salvatore Toto Reena, the notorious boss of Sicily's infamous Mafia, Cosa Nostra, was born. When Giovanni turned 25, he was convicted for his role in 4 murders, earning himself a life sentence. When the verdict was read, he stood quietly in a barred holding cell before briefly speaking with his lawyer through the bars. Growing up surrounded by organized crime, Giovanni didn't stray far from his father's path. He was deeply involved in the Mafia from a young age. In 1996, at 20, Giovanni was arrested in Corleone on charges related to Mafia association and a string of murders committed in 1995. These included the deaths of Giuseppe Giamana, Giovanna Giamana, Francesco Saporito, and Dr. Antonino Di Caro. In a chilling move, Di Caro's body was dissolved in acid, a grim tactic the Mafia often used to erase all traces of their victims. This brutal act marked Giovanni's baptism into Cosa Nostra, officially sealing his commitment to the Mafia's criminal world. Salvatore, Giovanni's father, was a ruthless figure known for his cold, calculated decisions. One infamous act of his was the brutal elimination of Giuseppe Di Matteo, a 12-year-old boy whose father had agreed to testify against the Mafia. In 1993, Giuseppe was lured by Mafia members disguised as police officers, promising to take him to see his father, who was being held in prison. Tragically, this was to be Giuseppe's last day as a free child. The Mafia didn't initially plan to do away with him. Instead, they wanted to use him as a tool to pressure his father, who had agreed to turn state's witness against the Mafia in the investigation of the murder of Judge Giovanni Falcone. They thought that by torturing the boy and sending photos of his suffering to his father, they could break him. The boy was locked in a cage, starved, and beaten over 779 agonizing days. When patience ran out, Salvatore ordered Giuseppe's death. By then, he was so weak from the torment that he couldn't even fight back. After dispatching him, they disposed of his body in acid, ensuring that there would be no evidence left and that the boy's family would never get to bury him properly. The horrific execution was carried out by Giovanni Brusca, Salvatore's loyal enforcer, who was arrested in May 1996. When Salvatore and Giovanni were eventually arrested, it sent shockwaves through the Mafia world. Their fall made it clear that even the most powerful weren't untouchable. While this didn't bring the Mafia's reign to an end, it did cause some members to rethink their methods. They learned from Salvatore and Giovanni's violent, attention-grabbing approach and opted instead for a quieter, more business-focused strategy to avoid attracting too much heat. Even after Giovanni was sentenced to life in prison, he reportedly continued to attempt to pull strings within the Mafia, sending coded letters and maintaining connections through his family. But as time passed, the old guard's hold over the organization began to slip away. Now, while Giovanni followed his father into the brutal mob life and ended up serving a life sentence, his younger brother Giuseppe took a different path. Giuseppe Salvatore Reena. Born in 1977, just 1 year after his older brother Giovanni. He grew up during the peak of his father's reign over the Cosa Nostra, so life was good at the time. While he was a teenager, his father was arrested in 1993 after decades of being Italy's most wanted man. For a while, Giuseppe seemed like he might not follow directly in his father's footsteps. In the early 2000s, he tried to maintain a relatively quiet profile, but when you're Reena, there's no such thing as going unnoticed. In 2002, at just 25 years old, Giuseppe was arrested for Mafia association, though he only served a short sentence and was released in 2011. And that's when things got weird. After prison, Giuseppe decided to do something no one saw coming. He wrote a book. Yep, in 2012, he published Reena Family Life, Reena Family Life, A Father's Story, which read like a sympathetic memoir about growing up with one of Italy's most notorious killers. In the book, he spoke affectionately about his father, portraying him more as a misunderstood family man than a cold-blooded mob boss. Needless to say, this did not go over well in Italy. Politicians, journalists, and even some Mafia experts were outraged. Many saw the book as an attempt to humanize Toto Reena and subtly revive Cosa Nostra's legacy through nostalgia and soft PR. Believe it or not, there were also rumors and reports that Giuseppe flirted with politics. In 2014, he even ran for office in his hometown of Corleone, campaigning for a seat on the local city council. His candidacy triggered a national scandal, with critics arguing that allowing a Reena on the ballot was like inviting the Mafia back into public life. He eventually withdrew, but the damage was done. People saw it as a symbol of how Mafia influence still lingered in Italy, especially in places like Sicily, where the Reena name still carried weight. Even though he wasn't caught actively committing new crimes, Giuseppe couldn't escape his bloodline. Italian authorities kept a close eye on him. His every move, interviews, book tours, public appearances, was scrutinized for signs of Mafia revivalism or coded messages to the underworld. In recent years, Giuseppe has kept a lower profile. With his father dead, Toto Reena died in prison in 2017, and his brother Giovanni serving life, Giuseppe is the only Reena son still walking free, but he's still heavily watched, especially in Sicily. Another person with an interesting childhood was Nicodemos Scaro Jr. Growing up as the son of one of the most feared Mafia bosses, Nicodemos Scaro Jr. never had a shot at a normal childhood. He was practically born into the Philly mob scene, and when his dad landed in prison, Jr. tried to carry on the family legacy, just not very successfully. Now his dad, Nicodemo Little Nicky Scaro, wasn't your typical behind-the-scenes mob boss. The man had a temper that could go nuclear over the smallest thing. While most crime bosses preferred to stay low-key, Scaro was loud, aggressive, and straight-up terrifying. If you even looked at him sideways, sideways, he might have you swimming with the fishes. But Junior? Not so much. He lacked his dad's brutal presence, and in the Mafia world, that's a serious flaw. On top of that, Junior had a lot of baggage to carry, mainly enemies his father made during his violent reign. Scarfo Sr. racked up a long list of people who wanted revenge, and once he was arrested in the late 80s, all hell broke loose in the Philly mob. With no clear leader, it turned into a free-for-all of backstabbing and power grabs. So when word got out that Scarfo Jr. might try to step into his dad's shoes, a lot of people weren't having it. Some saw it as their shot at revenge. In October 1989, while having lunch at a Brooklyn restaurant called Ribbit, Scarfo Jr. was ambushed. A gunman walked up and shot him 8 times. Neck, arms, chest, you name it, but somehow he survived. It was a clear mob hit, no question. And despite being riddled with bullets, he stuck to the code and didn't say a word about who did it. After that, Scarfo Jr. wisely stepped away from the Philly spotlight. He linked up with the Lucchese crime family in New York, probably hoping for protection and a clean slate. Fast forward to the mid-2000s, and Scarfo Jr. decided to ditch the bullets for boardrooms. Along with his partner in crime, Salvatore Palullo, he orchestrated one of the wildest mob scams in recent memory. They quietly took over a Texas-based mortgage company called First Plus Financial. Using family members and trusted goons, they filled top positions while posing as consultants. Then, they drained the company dry. Over $12 million gone through bogus contracts, fake deals, and outright theft. Scarfo Jr. went on a luxury shopping spree, mansions, fancy cars, even a yacht. The rest was funneled into offshore accounts and shell companies. Anyone who got in their way, they handled it old school. Threats, burner phones, code words, you name it. But the feds eventually caught on. In 2011, the FBI swooped in and arrested Scarfo Jr., Palullo, and their crew. After a long and chaotic trial, Scarfo Jr. was convicted in 2014 on multiple charges, including racketeering and fraud. He was slapped with a 30-year sentence. Since getting out, Scarfo Jr. has kept things quiet. No flashy comebacks, no signs that he's diving back into mob life. Maybe he's finally learned that not every legacy is worth reviving. Another guy who faced struggles a lot like Scarfo Jr. was Raymond Patriarcha Jr. Just like the other Mafia kids we've talked about, Raymond Jr. Patriarcha was born straight into mob life. His father, Raymond Patriarcha Sr., was the feared and iron-fisted boss of the New England Mafia. The elder Patriarcha ran things with brutal efficiency. Violence wasn't just part of the job, it was the job. He built up serious power and wealth, making life pretty comfortable for his family, at least when it came to money. But here's the thing about mob dynasties. The next generation usually isn't as tough. Most of these sons, including Junior, didn't have to claw their way to the top. They grew up with people serving them, not fearing them, and that softens the edge. After his father died, Raymond Jr. stepped up as boss, backed by the Mafia Commission and the powerful Gambino crime family in New York. But he just didn't have the same presence as his father. That opened the door to internal chaos, especially from underboss Gennaro Angiulo, who had so little respect for Jr. He actually tried to take control of the family while behind bars. Still, Jr. didn't get whacked, and he didn't completely lose control either, thanks to loyal allies like consigliere Ilario Zannino, who kept things from falling apart. Eventually, though, the heat caught up. Under Junior's watch, the family was tied to racketeering, extortion, drug trafficking, gambling, you name it. In 1990, he and underboss Nicholas Bianco were arrested, and by 1992, Junior was sentenced to 8 years in prison. After doing his time, he stepped away from the mob world. These days, he's reportedly focused on real estate back in Rhode Island, his family's old stomping grounds. Joseph Banano Jr. As the youngest son of Joseph Banano, the legendary mob boss who helped shape New York's Mafia, his father was powerful and feared, an old-school crime boss. But Joseph Jr. wasn't interested in that life. While his older brother Bill tried to keep the family business alive, Joseph Jr. chose a different path. He studied animal husbandry at the University of Arizona, far removed from the mob world, and later ran a ranch in California with his wife. However, trouble still found him. In the 1980s, he and his wife were arrested for selling cocaine to undercover agents. Shortly after, he was caught in a fraud scheme involving fake historical posters. So, while he didn't follow the traditional mob path, he still ended up doing time. Joseph Sr. built a criminal empire, but Joseph Jr. became the quiet son who tried to escape his father's legacy, only to learn there's no escaping the weight of the Banano name. Moving on, we have Alejandro Coronel. Being the son of a cartel boss comes with risks, but few face them as young as Alejandro Coronel, whose life ended in a brutal act of revenge. His father, Ignacio Nacho Coronel Villarreal, wasn't just a high-ranking Sinaloa cartel figure, he was the king of crystal, a top boss in the meth trade. That kind of power didn't just bring wealth, it brought enemies. Unlike many cartel heirs who inherit power as adults, Alejandro was thrown into the life early. By 16, he was already involved in operations, surrounded by violence and seen as leverage. In April 2010, the Beltran Leyva cartel, former Sinaloa allies turned enemies, kidnapped him. He wasn't a major player, but his last name made him a target. Days later, he was executed, his body left behind like a warning. Ignacio responded with blood. He launched a wave of revenge, hunting down those involved. But months later, he too was killed by Mexican forces. The cartel war continued, but for the Coronels, it was already lost. Alejandro never got the chance to prove himself, but the next heir in line did, until a shocking decision changed everything. Vicente Zambada Niebla. Growing up as the son of a cartel boss meant Vicente Zambada Niebla was never just another kid. His childhood wasn't about school or soccer games. It was about power, secrecy, and the weight of his father's name. His father, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, ran the Sinaloa cartel for decades. While El Chapo was hunted down and locked away, El Mayo remained a ghost, always untouchable. Vicente was his heir, the one being groomed to continue the empire. He wasn't just a cartel prince spending his father's fortune. He was deeply involved in the business, overseeing drug shipments and managing cartel money. But in 2009, his luck ran out. Vicente was arrested in Mexico City and later extradited to the U.S., facing a life sentence. He made a move no one expected. He cooperated. In 2019, he testified against El Chapo, giving U.S. authorities inside information in exchange for a reduced sentence. It was a shocking betrayal, but it worked. Vicente's cooperation bought him a way out of prison. Then, in 2024, something no one thought would happen finally did. El Mayo was captured. The man who had evaded authorities for decades was now behind bars. With his father gone, the cartel is in chaos, but Vicente won't be around to see what happens next. He's under U.S. protection now, his past a shadow that will never fully disappear. Ovidio Guzman Lopez. Fame was never something Ovidio asked for, but with a name like Guzman, it was inevitable. His father, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, built one of the most powerful drug empires in history. Ovidio, nicknamed El Raton, the Mouse, grew up surrounded by wealth, danger, and loyalty that could cost your life. Unlike his father, who rose from poverty, Ovidio was born into cartel royalty. As one of Los Chapitos, he didn't earn his place. He inherited it, managing drug shipments and expanding the family business. But power made him a target. In January 2023, Mexican forces captured him in Culiacan, sparking chaos across the city. This time, despite the cartel's firepower, Ovidio didn't escape. By September, he was extradited to the U.S., facing drug and money laundering charges. His father ruled the drug world. Ovidio may end up caged by the very legacy he was born into. His arrest rocked the Sinaloa cartel, and so his half-brother did something smart, something that's likely still keeping him alive. Jesus Guzman Salazar, son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Being born into a drug empire comes with unimaginable wealth, but it also comes with a death sentence. Jesus Alfredo learned that early. His father, El Chapo, wasn't just a cartel boss. He was the most powerful drug lord in the world. That power made his family rich, but also made them targets. In August 2016, while enjoying a luxurious night out in Puerto Vallarta, Jesus Alfredo's worst nightmare became reality. Armed men stormed the restaurant with military precision. These weren't ordinary criminals. They were members of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, the Sinaloa cartel's most dangerous rival. His name, his bloodline, and his ties to the drug world had finally caught up with him. He was dragged away and vanished into the night. In the cartel world, kidnappings rarely end well. Torture, execution, and a video message sent to enemies was the usual script. But then something unexpected happened. Days later, Jesus Alfredo was released. No public ransom, no bloody cartel war, just silence. Whatever deal was made, it happened behind closed doors. Since then, he stayed in the shadows. While some of his brothers remain active, his movements are unknown. In his world, attention gets you killed, and maybe staying hidden is the only way to survive. Guzman Salazar wasn't the only one who had the idea of staying low and being invisible. However, the next person did it better. Luis Fernando Ariano Felix. The name Ariano Felix is infamous in Mexico, synonymous with violence and power. Born into this legacy, Luis Fernando Ariano Felix grew up surrounded by cartel business, fear, and chaos. His uncles ran the brutal Tijuana cartel, controlling drug routes and ordering executions. After their fall, his mother, Enedina Arellano Felix, kept the organization alive. While his family made headlines for bloodshed, Luis Fernando stayed in the shadows. In the 90s, Tijuana became a war zone. In 1997, his uncle Ramon ordered a nightclub massacre in Puerto Vallarta that escalated the conflict with the Sinaloa cartel. One by one, the Arellano Felix brothers were either killed or jailed. Luis Fernando, raised amid this violence, was always protected and always a target, yet he's never been publicly tied to the cartel. No arrests, no confirmed role. Some say he walked away from the life. Others believe he learned the most valuable lesson. Survival means staying invisible. In the narco world, silence is power. And while Luis Fernando remains a mystery, the next cartel heir made sure the world knew his name. Sarapin Zambada Ortiz. His father, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, is a legend. Zambada ran the Sinaloa cartel for decades without ever being caught. He was always one step ahead, always hidden, never seen. But Sarapin, he saw things differently. Instead of staying in the shadows like his father, he embraced the spotlight. He flaunted his wealth on social media and enjoyed all the privileges that came with his last name. The cars, the parties, the lifestyle, it was all out there for the world to see. And that's exactly what made him an easy target. In 2013, at just 23, Sarapin was arrested while trying to cross the U.S.-Mexico border in Arizona. Authorities had been watching him for years. The moment he stepped on American soil, they moved in. Faced with serious drug trafficking charges, he didn't put up a fight. He pleaded guilty, possibly hoping for leniency. In 2018, he was sentenced to just 5.5 years in prison. A surprisingly light sentence considering his cartel ties, but for a cartel heir, it was a humiliating fall. His father had spent a lifetime avoiding law enforcement. Sarapin had practically walked into their hands. Since his release, he's vanished. No arrests, no sightings, no new social media posts. Some say he's left the cartel life behind. Others believe he's learned the hard way. In the drug world, the most powerful figures are the ones no one ever sees coming. The next person had no normal childhood. From a young age, he was helping his mom to ship drugs. Michael Corleone Blanco. His mother was Griselda Blanco, La Madrina, the Black Widow, one of history's most ruthless drug lords, and Michael was her last surviving son, so of course she wanted her only son as close to her as possible. This meant that violence was his reality. His brothers were killed one by one in the cocaine wars, and Michael knew it was only a matter of time. Still, he played his part, managing the cartel's finances and keeping the money flowing. Then, in 2012, everything changed. Griselda was gunned down in Medellin, killed the same way she had executed so many others. It was the end of an era. Michael faced a choice: follow her path and die, or break the cycle. He chose to walk away. Now he runs Pure Blanco, a clothing brand rooted in his past but aimed at a different future. The Blanco name still turns heads, but for once it's not because of blood. Sebastian Maroquin. Being the son of a wanted man like Pablo Escobar's son was never Sebastian's choice. But life doesn't offer choices like that. As a kid, he had everything: mansions, private zoos, endless money. But behind it all was constant fear. His father was the world's most powerful drug lord, and danger lurked everywhere. In 1993, it all collapsed. Escobar was gunned down in Medellin, and Sebastian, his mother and sister became fugitives. They fled Colombia, eventually settling in Argentina with new identities. Juan Pablo Escobar became Sebastian Maroquin. He tried to start fresh, becoming an architect and building homes instead of empires, but his father's shadow loomed large. Whispers followed him. Would he become like Pablo? Instead, Sebastian chose to tell the truth. He wrote Pablo Escobar, my father, and even met with victims of his father's violence to ask for forgiveness. But in 2018, Argentine authorities accused him of money laundering, charges he denied. Today, he lives in Argentina, speaking out against crime and trying to prove that legacy isn't destiny. Escaping his father's shadow wasn't easy, but he's still standing, just like the next person, Michael Franesi. If the name Franesi rings a bell, it's because Michael was born into one of the deadliest mafia families in American history. His father, John Sonny Franesi, was one of the most feared underbosses in the Colombo crime family. While most kids were learning how to ride bikes or throw a baseball, Michael was learning the rules of the mob: loyalty, power, and most importantly, silence. But believe it or not, Michael didn't plan on following in his father's footsteps. He was actually in medical school when life threw him a curveball. His father was sentenced to 50 years in prison, and Michael, as the eldest son, was expected to step up, and step up he did. In the 1980s, Michael masterminded one of the most brilliant scams in Mafia history, a gasoline tax scheme that siphoned off nearly $250 million from the U.S. government. It was so smooth that law enforcement struggled to keep up. At his peak, Michael lived large: private jets, mansions, Ferraris, and was even listed by Fortune magazine as one of the richest and most powerful mafia bosses. But nothing lasts forever. In 1986, he was arrested and sentenced for racketeering. Behind bars, something shifted. Michael walked away from the mob, an almost unthinkable move. The Mafia doesn't forgive, and he knew death could come at any moment, yet somehow he survived. Today, Michael is a motivational speaker, using his past to warn others about the dangers of organized crime. He broke free from the mob, but not every Mafia heir was so lucky. Edgar Guzman Lopez. The name Guzman in the mob world meant power and danger. Edgar Guzman Lopez, the son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, was, in a sense, lucky to be born into narco royalty. But unlike others who dove into the business, Edgar preferred a different lifestyle: music, flashy cars, and luxury. It didn't matter. In the cartel world, you don't have to be involved to be targeted. On May 8, 2008, at just 22 years old, Edgar was ambushed in a shopping center parking lot in Culiacan. Over 500 bullets were fired, leaving his body unrecognizable. The killers were believed to be from the rival Beltran Leyva cartel. His death triggered an all-out war. Blood flowed across Mexico. His family later built a mausoleum fit for royalty, air conditioning, marble floors, even Wi-Fi, a final flex from beyond the grave. Edgar didn't choose the cartel life, but he was born into it, and it cost him everything. Well, that's a wrap. Did you enjoy the video? If you did, don't miss our other videos. In fact, why don't you click on one of the cards on your screen? Thanks for watching.